everybody, welcome to one more round with Josh Norris. Today I've got my good friend Jack O'Hara. What's super cool about this is you're the first person that's ever come on this twice.
Really?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, like, am I one of the first ever two-time guests?
Yeah.
First ever two-time guest. I love it.
And I mean, shoot, I think it was maybe last March or April that you came on, so it's been a hot
We'll have
minute.
a yearly checkup from here on out.
Yeah. Now we've had lunch and stuff since, but a lot's changed. At the time, you were at a studio here in Scottsdale. Since then, now you've got a studio here, right?
That's right.
Las Vegas.
Here, Vegas.
And Nashville.
Yep.
So
all over the place.
For those of you guys who don't know, tell them a little bit about your show.
So the O Show with Jack O'Hara, you can like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube channel at Jack O'Hara TV. Just an interview style show. We've talked about it. My background is in sportscasting. Always wanted to be a sportscaster since I was 5 years old. And when I was 17, 18 years old, I'm like, why don't we just start a podcast? I hit record, I started talking, and poof, 7 years later, here we are with our own channel, having studios all over the country and interviewing all walks of life. So many cool people I've gotten to meet, and I've had the chance to build so many cool relationships with people.
Yeah, that's the neatest thing. I'm sure your Rolodex, which is the oldest term, your phone, I should say, is just full of numbers.
It's funny. Like I learned that term through my dad.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, this guy's connecting with everybody. He's like, oh, so he's like the master Rolodex. I'm like, I don't know what that means, but sure, yeah, he's connecting me with people.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a Rolodex?
No.
Okay, so
No.
I got to explain
I'm
this.
sure I have.
And if you're under 30, I'm giving you some education. So it's literally this little box. You open the box, and there's these little cards, and they're all connected by this little wheel. And it would have name, a phone number, and usually an address of a person. And that was your moneymaker, your Rolodex.
That's way past my time.
Totally.
Yeah.
Now it's just all in our little box that we carry in our pocket.
One of these days, I was seeing all these new AI formats, people on their hands, calling their wives on their hands, people speaking at events, and they're like, this is the future.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, this is kind of nuts.
Just
think 25 years down the line, like, my kids could be talking on their hands.
Well, and think about this with AI, like they could actually talk to maybe their grandfather that passed away.
But are they really?
No. Well, no. But with AI, it can replicate all the similarities, all the thoughts, the cadence of talk, the image of that person. It's going to happen. I mean, I think it'll be creepy as all get out when it does, but I think that's something that AI will go down.
Yeah, there's going to be a few things that they're probably not going to work out all the kinks. If you're talking to grandma and grandma says something off color, you're like, that's not something my grandma would say. That's not something my Meemaw would say.
Did she just drop the N-word?
Yeah, what the hell happened?
So we were talking about comedy, and I had asked you, because I just did this cool event yesterday called Kingdom Builders, and I got a chance to share on stage. And I asked you if you had done any public speaking, which, as I said, technically everything you do is public speaking.
Right.
But you said you've done stand-up quite a few times.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Scariest thing in the entire world.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like no other. It's like I'm trying to think of something that you think would be really easy to do, like riding a bike. Like, oh yeah, that seems easy if you never tried it, and then you try it, you're like, oh my god, like you have to stay balanced on the bike. It's like with comedy, you think, oh, being funny is easy. I'm funny. Everybody thinks they're somewhat funny.
Yeah.
Couch funny, as they'd say in the business, right?
Yep.
You get up there on stage and you realize, like, oh, I have to remember all the material I wrote down. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a different perspective that's watching you.
Yep.
Everybody's wanting to laugh. That's the objective. Like, make me laugh, man.
Right.
You're up there for 5-10 minutes, and like if something doesn't hit, immediately shakes your confidence if it's just crickets, right?
Totally.
Like the first few open mics I did, I think the first open mic I ever did went really well. And I was surprised. I'm like, I remembered everything that I wrote down, all my material. I was getting praise from all of, like, the people that were headlining. They're like, dude, great job for your first time. Like, come back. And then like the next 2 or 3 times completely bombed to the point where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. But then like that entrepreneurial, go-getter mindset in me was like, no, like this should sting. I got to go back up there and like actually take charge and learn from my mistakes. And I was fortunate enough to do a few gigs at the House of Comedy and that comedy club, and people will laugh at just about anything because they're looking to laugh, as opposed to open mic nights. There was one open mic night where it was literally 2 people were there and they both had their backs turned, just like doing homework and stuff. So I'm like, all right, free night to work on my material because I'm not going to get a reaction out of anybody.
Yeah.
But the shows that we did at the clubs was fun because I could just play off the crowd. There was a couple on their first date in high school that I was just ribbing on for 10 minutes straight, interviewing them. Like it's a lot of fun. But if anybody wants to get into public speaking in any regard, whether it be like business, sports, motivational speakers, like try stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
Because it'll test you. It'll test your morale. It'll test your emotions for sure. Especially when you get that stinging feeling that, oh, I'm not as funny as I thought I was.
Yeah. Well, I've always wanted to try it. Like I've spoken like I did yesterday, many, many different times. And, it's very different because there obviously are jokes in there and people are laughing at different things. But my objective isn't necessarily to make them laugh other than kind of take them through the series of emotions, right? So
Exactly.
I make them laugh a little bit. Then I tell them about when I almost died last year and that whole, and everybody gets real quiet. And it's just very interesting seeing the audience react. It's like an energy, which is fun. Like at the end, everybody came up to me afterwards. Oh my God, it was so great, man. And I'm like, I really appreciate it, but it's just
because you're also being yourself up there. It's like you're telling your story. You know how to work a crowd. Like that's why I'm like really obsessed with pro wrestling. Like the storylines in the ring are great too, but like the storytelling when it comes to promos and the mic work for some of those people.
Right.
That's what got me, into podcasting too and like wanting to be a broadcaster. So I'm like, I know how to tell a story. I know how to talk. I want to be able to tell a story.
Right.
Where like if I was up there public speaking, like I know how to work a crowd, right?
Absolutely.
I think my opener actually, because we had like an inside joke, a few pro wrestling fans that were comedians at the House of Comedy. I got up on stage my first ever time doing the House of Comedy. And I was like, if everybody's ready for the headliner, give me a hell yeah. And everybody was like, hell yeah. For those who know Stone Cold Steve Austin, that's like one of his big catchphrases. So like right off the bat, I'm like, all right, I got them engaged. I just got to keep them hooked.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I was going to try to do something yesterday a little bit different, and I opted against it, but I was going to do a magic trick. And so there's this one. So
yeah, that could have killed in either direction, my friend.
Well, it would have actually probably done pretty well because let me just say I wrote down the 7 of spades, right? And I say, hey, do you like high cards or low cards? And you say, I like high cards. Great.
Yeah.
Take all the high cards off the deck. Do you like black cards or red cards? And then you say, I like red cards. Cool. All the red cards out of the deck. Do you like spades or clubs? I like spades. Cool. We're gonna keep the spades. Do you like 7, 8, or do you like 6 through 2? Anyway, you get it down to that, and it's going so fast, and people are answering different questions that I end up on the number or the card I want, and they don't know what that card is, and I just pull it out of my pocket. So I was going to do that, and then say, here, the objective is you got to know what you want and where you want to go, and then you got to direct things to get you there. Right?
Yep.
So that was going to be how I started, and I'm like, I'll save that for some other time. So. Yeah.
When you're already over as a speaker.
Right, exactly, and by no means am I over whatsoever. I am speaking at a PPC convention for physical therapists.
Oh, wow.
So that's going to be boring for anybody that is not a physical therapist because they want to learn from me because that's my background. I've done it forever, and it'll be great. But like if somebody just randomly, got a cocktail and stumbled into the room at the hotel that we're going to be in, got there, they would be like, oh my God. What are they talking about here?
The most boring people on the planet.
Yeah, so from like yesterday, really emotional to just very tactical and all that stuff. So, but so comedy, how do you put together your bits? Like, what are your
Well, I think everybody takes from their own personal life experiences, right?
Yeah.
I think one of mine was I go to Longhorn Steakhouse weekly. I go there religiously, and there was one time. I was showing up, and all the bartenders know me, the waitresses, the owner, the manager. They'll take me to my booth, give me like the free appetizer card. Sometimes I ate for free. And there was one time Post Malone was there, and he was waiting. And I pulled up. This was in college. I pulled up in an Uber because I didn't have a car then. I pulled up in my Uber. There's security guards everywhere. There's Chevy Tahoes everywhere, screaming people. I'm like, oh, there's probably someone famous in there. And I walked in. I'm like, oh yeah, Post Malone. It was like a year or two after he came out with like his huge album back in like 2017, 2018. And I'm a rock guy, so it's like I knew who Post Malone was. He was like probably the biggest musician at the time, at least in like pop and hip hop and rap, whatever he does everything.
He's a tattoo face guy,
great,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
All over the place, yeah. But I walk in and they're like sorting out where he's gonna sit or whatever, and the manager like peeks over Post Malone's shoulder. He's like, Jack, what's up, man? Let me take you to your booth. And like, there's probably like 20 different people waiting too. It's a Saturday night, or maybe it was Friday night because he had a show on Saturday. He was performing it was like the Gold Rush Music Festival in Phoenix. And he like looked over his shoulder. He's like, who the fuck is that guy?
Right, yeah.
And I'm just like, I get to sit before Post Malone. I felt like such a rock star, and that went over pretty well.
And is that just because you went there every week and you like were nice to people and got to know people?
Yeah, this was probably like 3 years. I think sophomore, junior into college, like I said, I went every week, once or twice a week for 2 years at this point.
Yeah.
Nobody's a regular Longhorn Steakhouse, right?
Right.
It's just like a franchise steakhouse, but like that's all I can afford. And they're like, oh yeah, that's Jack, come on. We'll take him to his table, and they're like, who's Jack?
Yeah, that's awesome. It's kind of like Opal Life, you know. I still go back there once
Exactly.
a week, and it's just great to see everybody. But I know everybody.
You're like
that
Norm
works-
in Cheers.
So
Norm,
like literally,
Josh.
literally, I walk in the other day, and it's Karen, it's Mike. I think Candace was there, and like as soon as I walked, it was like Josh, and then the Bridget. Oh, it was Bridget was there who used to work there, and then a couple of the girls that work there. And I'm like, wow, that's cool.
They miss me.
Yeah.
They like me. They
like-
really, really like
Yeah.
me.
They're like, you want your usual? I'm like, yeah, I do.
Oh, there was one time I didn't even get a menu. I sat down. They're like, the usual. I'm like, tell me. They're like, yeah, 16-ounce ribeye, steamed broccoli, Caesar salad. I'm like, man, I'm coming here too much.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you. And it was out within 5 minutes. It's easy.
So with like putting together the bits, though, you just kind of observational things that happen to you in life and stories and
Exactly. And especially being a podcaster, getting to hear so many other different stories. I had a few stories in my insurance job as well. I think there was one time, and I got to share this story on stage, about this lady who was trying to take her husband, who was going to be her ex-husband, for everything that she was worth. She wanted to like erase the policies, whatever. She was telling me she wants full custody of the kids, the house, everything. And it's like, what did he do? And she's like, well, I just didn't, feel like he was putting in a lot of effort, so I fell out of love with him and cheated on him with his younger brother, who then got pregnant with her younger brother's child. So I'm on the phone with this lady being like, I have to help her because she can't afford it. I actually put her on hold. I'm like, can I put you on hold for a second? And I asked my manager, I'm like, here's the scenario. And he's like, man, like that sucks, but we got to help her because everything kind of matches up. Like if she can afford it, the finances and everything. I'm like, wow. So I'm like, wow, that stinks for you, lady. I guess we can help you. But in my head, I'm like, what a bitch.
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
like, you're taking everything from this guy, did nothing to you.
Well, and your one son is now about to have a son and a cousin.
How gross is that?
That is disgusting.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
Wow.
imagine being cheated on, but like being cheated on with your younger brother who's supposed to be.
Your brother. Yeah. No, man, that's insane.
But I got to tell that story, so that one popped off pretty well. I'm sure there were a few others. I'm trying to think. I think I played off the fact that I wasn't a real comedian too. I'm
Yeah.
like, my friends just invite me here. They're all there like taking notes. Like everybody's writing out their material, practicing. I'm like, I came out here with nothing. I'm like, oh, should I have prepared something? I'm like, if there was a piss break segment during this entire show, this is it. And like
love it.
10 people would like get up. They're like, cool, man.
That's a good joke. Yeah. I've always wondered because yesterday I prepared quite a bit, for it, but they were just bullet points, so I knew
Exactly.
how I was going to tell the story all
Because
the way
if you like break down everything, you're trying to memorize everything.
Yeah.
It's like you can't do that.
Oh, like if I had a teleprompter, great, but I'm not a teleprompter guy. But do you do that? Do you kind of like bullet point what you want to talk about and then kind of just tell it on the fly?
And it kind of went that way with podcasting too. Like I started out like 10 bullet point question. It was just question and answer, trying to memorize my questions, trying to think what's my next question as my guest is talking, which is never a good interview. And then in comedy, I did the same thing. I would write out like my entire script. It'd be like 2 pages, 3 pages long. And the first few times I did it, I'm like trying to memorize everything. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. And when I didn't, there was one time, and it was the one time I brought like a couple of friends to come see me perform, and I totally went, like my brain farted.
Yeah.
Didn't remember anything.
And
I was just off the cuff, just like making fun of that guy, and then I was probably off like 3 minutes. I had like 3 minutes left, but I couldn't think of anything else, so I was just like, I'm done.
That's the one thing I hear from comedians is how long time is when you're up there. Like how long a minute is.
Oh, just imagine the guys doing 90 minutes on Netflix.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about a couple of new ones that came out. I was just recently introduced to Nate Bargatze.
Yep.
And really it was on TikTok. Like TikTok now knows what I like. Like I'm not trying to look at a bunch of freaking random chicks. That's what they tried to serve me up when I first got my account. Now it's like Jordan Peterson, and then it's like comedy and wrestling. Like I've been watching like all these old wrestling things. But Nate Bargatze, I'm scrolling and I'd never seen this guy. And his humor's so clean and it's so like precise on how he enunciates every word. Like Who are your favorite types of comedians? So more like that, very buttoned up, or more off the
It's
cuff,
funny.
like a Theo Von type?
Because I'd say my two favorite comedians of all time are Bill Burr, who's completely off the cuff, and then Jim Gaffigan, who is completely tightened up,
Yes.
dad humor, just fat guy who eats a lot, you know. But he's amazing. Like that's my go-to guy when I'm falling asleep at night. I'm like, just throw on Jim Gaffigan. I've probably seen all of his specials. There's like 8 of them on both Prime and Netflix. I've seen all of them dozens of times, but I just keep watching them because I'm like, it makes me laugh every single time. And Nate Bargatze's like that perfect mix of Bill Burr and Jim Gaffigan, where it's clean. He's got a young daughter, so it's like he's got like that laid-back Tennessee vibe, but he also has Bill Burr's like come on, man, like life's way more easier than people make it out to be.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Like, he had this joke that made me like, I've been married 17 years. And he was flying in, and he was meeting his wife in Florida. She was flying somewhere else, and he was going to pick her up. So they're on the phone, and he's like, hey, what time are you leaving? And she's like, noon. It's like, hon, it's 11:30. If the airport was in the driveway, I'm not sure you could get there. And she says, oh, no, I'm leaving for the airport at noon. And he says, what did you think I was asking when I asked that question? Yeah. And it's so true. Like, when I look at sometimes the way Jess and I communicate, like, it makes perfect sense what her answer is to me or my answer is to her, but like, unless you fully communicate it, it doesn't always get there. Just little things like that he picks up on. He's very good. You know, my favorite these days, though, is Theo Von.
Theo's great. I actually was talking to Theo 2 weeks ago. We were on an email chain together.
No kidding.
Trying to get him on the show. And for people who obviously set up interviews in the media space and media scrums, we were trying to get him in the studio in Vegas. His publicist initially, because I was reaching out to a few, like Bill Burr, Sebastian Maniscalco's got his movie coming out. Sebastian seems like he's kind of busy right now with his new movie and everything going on, maybe next year. But Theo's team was just like, no, we're not interested. You know, basically like, thanks, but we're going to pass on the opportunity. That's usually the message you get if they don't want to. But then like an hour after that, Theo responded to the email himself saying, absolutely, let's dance, playa, with a hang loose emoji. I'm like, well, how on brand is that? I'm like, so are we on? Like, is this going to happen? And then he CC'd another one of his team members who's just like, yeah, he's interested. Let's see if we could do it when he's in town. What's your budget, basically? So it's like, okay, how much are we willing to pay? I think the most we were willing to pay was $3,000 for the hour, and they wanted at least $5,000.
Okay.
So they weren't willing to budge on it. But I'm like, I'm gonna keep that in my back pocket. You know, if I have $5,000 to spend, I'm calling up Theo's agent again. Because he's one of the top 3 comedians in the world right now. Like, that's worth the investment.
Now, where would it be? Would it be a virtual or would
in person?
Okay,
oh, yeah.
so
$5,000 for virtual.
Here's what I'll tell you: if you need to make up that extra $2,000, as long as I get to meet him, I'll make up that extra $2,000.
I will keep that in mind then. I messaged her. I'm like, next time he's back in town, I'm going to make that work. Right now, they don't want to make it work, but I will make that work.
Yeah.
No. Again, like, you got to take advantage of opportunities like that, especially me at my stage in my life. Like, that would be a game-changing interview, especially in person, to build that relationship.
100%. And I mean, he knows everybody in the industry. His podcast is like really popped off. He's got everybody on there. But like, I just love his humor, and he's got such short quips to where a lot of it's just coming out of thin air a lot of times. He's buttoned up on stage, not buttoned up, but at least there's an act. Off stage, though, that's where some of his funniest stuff is, man. It's crazy.
Oh, his podcast is hilarious. I learn new terminology every time I listen to him and his guests. I'm like, man, how did he get that?
Yeah, I think like raccoons, forest shrimp or something like that. He had said, just random stupid things like that. You know who you had mentioned, Sebastian Maniscalco.
Hilarious.
Like, that dude.
My brother turned me on to him when he was like 15 years old.
Okay.
One of his original stand-ups. I'm like, this guy's awesome, the way he moves his body and everything. And there was a lot of people who I'm friends with that were like, I don't really like this guy. And then 4 or 5 years down the road, they're like, dude, you got to watch this one guy, Sebastian Maniscalco. I'm like, dude, I introduced you to him 4 or 5 years ago. What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, he has that physical humor that's not like over-the-top physical humor, but it's all part of the act. And it just basically makes everything bigger about what he's saying.
Yeah.
And it's a stage presence. I can't think of the last person we saw with that kind of stage presence with the physical humor. Can you?
I don't think there has been any.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there was. I haven't seen any.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I could think of, and it's not even
maybe
the same,
Mulaney a little bit.
Mulaney, yeah.
A little bit.
He does a little bit more of the physical. Sometimes with Chappelle, when he pounds the mic and all that stuff, but that's more like a social cue for people to laugh that he's got, like he's triggered in people's minds, which that in and of itself is cool. Like that guy's
intelligent.
He's been at it so
brainwashing
long.
people.
He's been brainwashing people for years. And then the cadence of how he talks and he tells stories, like it's just, he knows how to pull people in by that. That's all these nuances are great. And I think you said it, but Ed Milet, so he loves comedy.
Yeah.
And one of the things he says is, I study comedians. Have you ever seen Ed speak in person?
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, you know how powerful he is. And he's funny, but he can be intense and serious, and he can quiet, he can go emotion, like he has it all. He says, but I learned the most from comedians, just the way they commanded the stage. And that was very interesting. The first time I heard that, I started studying comedians more because, you know, I'm getting different opportunities just coming to me to speak. And I'm like, I don't know, who am I to speak? But I have a story, so I want to start getting good at it. So
I've at least this is my experience. Like when I first started broadcasting, I knew what to do, and people were like, "Oh my God, you're a natural." It's like, no, I was studying this like my entire life. Like you look at a guy like Ed Milet, when you're preparing to public speak, you're like, this is how it's done. This is how you tell a story. You have mixed emotions, you know. 1 second you're telling a funny story, the next you're telling an emotional story, and you're piecing it all together as you go along.
Yeah.
And people are like, "Oh my God, that was amazing. How do you do that? You've never done that before." It's like, I've watched people do it, and then you just mimic that to start until you find your own thing.
Absolutely. Well, you're right, because there's templates on how you do it, basically. And one thing I remember, one of my favorite stories of his is his son Max, and it's Max is kind of growing into his body. I think he's 13, 14, and it's like a father-son golf tournament that they're in. And he was playing, and Max like, as long as we're having fun, right, Dad? That's right, son. You know, and he wasn't
Playing that well?
Yeah, he wasn't playing that well, and they were playing against this other couple, and the other dad said something negative about Max, and Ed snapped. And then then you get the physical of, what'd you say to my son?
Yeah.
And, and he gets in his kitchen, and then he goes to his son Max and he says, listen, winning is fun. We're gonna win. Max, I'm gonna tell you exactly what you do. Do you want to win? I'm like, yeah, Dad. Cool. We're gonna win. And he gets super intense. He's like, okay, you're gonna hit the ball there. Just swing there. Boom, hits it right where he wants. Okay, now you're gonna drop it. You're gonna drop it 10 feet from the pin. Boom, there. Hits it. Now his confidence is starting to grow. And he putts it, gets it in. He birdies the hole, right? They go on to being, I think, 7 or 8 back, if I remember correctly, to winning and beating the guy. And Ed just said, that was the day that Max turned. And he tells that story so vividly. You're like getting all the emotions as a dad of, watching your son kind of grow into this next version of himself, but also, F you to somebody who says something negative to my son. And then, the joy of being a son and like being in those moments, with your dad. So it's those types of things that he does super well that I don't see very often.
Do you know what he said?
What?
To his son?
I don't know what he said.
I mean, golfers are some of the biggest.
Something like Max can just carry the bags. Yeah. Something along that tone.
Right.
And and this was 10 years ago. Ed was like, I was doing a lot of creatine back then, and Ed's, famous for testosterone. He's a freaking,
of course,
yoked dude. But so it's fun seeing how they interact and stuff. So what do you want to do in the next several years with your podcast? How do you
the
want to
podcast? We're just looking to grow and expand. I think starting today, we're going to be doing live shows at the Hot Chick in Old Town Scottsdale, Arizona, which is going to be a lot of fun. I got a few comedians coming on the show today, a few business owners. We're going to talk to celebrities that they have. Frankie Muniz is a big supporter of the Hot Chick. Rob Schneider is out here. We're going to get him on. It's just continuing to build the brand and do what I love to do. Like I always tell people, I got into this to interview my heroes at the end of the day. Yeah. I grew up on TV watching specific people talk about Chris Jericho. Like that's the interview that, validated everything for me. It's like that was the number one guy. I'm like, when I start a podcast, my vision to sit with Chris Jericho. We did it over Zoom. Hopefully I get to talk to him in person one of these days. Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters is another one that's a huge idol of mine. Michael Kay, voice of the New York Yankees, I want to get in this interview. Howard Stern, of course, greatest interviewer of all time on Sirius XM. There's just so many different elements in just telling stories and getting to know people and just having conversations like this. Because it's like if you have like a Chris Jericho or like say you get like Slash from Guns N' Roses, it's like you know who they are, right? You know what they've accomplished. you sit down with them for an hour, you just shoot the shit and talk about anything, and that might catch their interest.
Right.
And then not only do you have a conversation that they've never had before on the air, they look at that and be like, man, that was great. Like, let me introduce you to my friend so-and-so. You know, I just had, his name's Frank Sidoris, who's a guitarist in Slash's band, actually, out in Las Vegas. And he has his own dive bar out there. He's like, dude, you got to swing by the dive bar, like, after the interview. He's like, that was great, man. Like, let's hang out. Come to my dive bar. Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top hangs out there all the time. Come hang with us. I'll introduce you to him. Maybe he'll come on your show. And then all of a sudden, you're building all of these new bridges, you know? All it takes is one person to attach you to someone else, who attaches you to someone else, and so on and so forth.
That's it, man. The bigger that web gets, the better. And I do mine is more business related, just because like I do it so I can meet people, you know, from a business standpoint. But it would be fun to meet some of these guys just to see how they are in person.
Of course. And like the thing is, especially at my age, learning like the business and how to finance everything and monetize it from an audio, YouTube, social media, sponsorships, like websites, you know. That aspect of it, I'm learning more and more about every day. You know, you make a little bit of money, but the goal is to, you know, hopefully one day, 10 years, 20 years down the road, support a family on it, while also doing other things. I've always wanted to be in TV, you know, broadcast television, play-by-play announcing. I did a little work with ESPN, obviously in college with GCU, doing all of that stuff. Being a play-by-play voice of a Major League Baseball team is still a goal of mine.
Yeah.
Hopefully in the next year or two, I get to kind of pay my dues in the minor leagues, hopefully. The thing there is that you don't make a lot of money in broadcast television, so I want to have my finances set when I do do that. You know, we talk about insurance, selling insurance policies and all that stuff. Great commission there for anybody that wants to join. All you really need is your life producer's license too in order to get into that stuff. There's a lot of opportunity out here for that as well, with like Real Financial and Andy Elliott and Brad Lee and all of those guys. You know, you just got to be willing to put in the work. But I'm enjoying the grit aspect of it. You know, when I was 17, I was a kid who just wanted to be a talk show host. Now at 24, I'm hungry and as driven as ever to not only still to do that, but also make as much money as possible so I can finance this and get to travel and meet all of these people along the way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's face it. Dude, you're 24 years old.
Yeah.
You're getting to go to Vegas and meet some really cool people, interview them, building your network. You're getting to go to Nashville. Hang out in Nashville, which is my favorite city.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool life you got going on right now.
There are times too where it's frustrating, like things aren't working out. Sometimes I'll travel to Vegas only for my guests to be like, hey, I can't make it, let's reschedule, and then I'm stuck in Vegas. Like that aspect of it, I don't think a lot of people would be willing to do.
Right.
People would be like, oh, this sucks. Like this isn't worth my time or investment. But I'm like, and I knew going in, I'm like, this is probably going to happen every now and then. You know, you got to make the most of it. You got to have a plan B, plan C, plan D, have backups just in case. But there's certain elements of it that are frustrating every single day, whether financially, of course, anybody could relate to that. You know, people just being in a bad mood. Talk about the Dave Matthews story. I've told this story like 1,000 times with Dave Matthews. Shattered my phone.
Because it was supposed to be just a written interview. Who does that?
I didn't get the memo. It was supposed to be a written interview. And I interviewed a few other guys like Rivers Cuomo from Weezer, Ben Gibbard from Death Cab for Cutie. Those two were just like, yeah, I don't care, whatever. But Dave Matthews just like, I still have the phone too. I'm hoping to interview him again one day and just show him the phone, to have a full circle moment there. Because I do think like he's a very talented musician, good actor too in a few movies. Maybe I caught him on a bad day, because I've had family members meet him too. It's like, oh, he was the nicest guy. I'm like, okay, maybe he was just hungry or something.
Needed a Snickers.
But like there are, you know, come full circle on that question. There are times where I just don't appreciate the situation I'm in. I'm like, I could be sitting at a desk right now, completely unfulfilled, making like $1,200 every 2 weeks.
Yeah, but see those things like traveling to Vegas and somebody not showing up, you know, the financial stuff. That's what tests your mettle. That's what makes you stronger. I'll never forget. So I did Amway forever. I told a lot about that story yesterday on stage, and it was really from like 2002 to about 2009. And I put a lot of time, energy, money into that, and I got really good at sponsoring people. But I had a group out in San Diego, and here's what my schedule looked like. On Tuesday night, I would work for Eric in there at Pure Fitness, collecting all my lead boxes, and I would start at about 10 in the morning. I'd be done by 1 o'clock, and then at 1 o'clock I would drive to San Diego, 6 hours from here. I'd get there at 7 o'clock. We'd attend what's called an open meeting, and at that open meeting we would then have a night out, and the night out is where you do teaching and training, and then I would take my guy out to In-N-Out Burger there, and then I would drive home get home about 4:30 in the morning, and I'd wake up the next morning and I'd go to work. I did that for at least 6 solid months. And there were times, and so Tom Green, who we're still friends this day, love that guy, great trainer. He'd be like, yeah, I got a guest out. I have a guest that's going to be there, and I would go out specifically so that I could talk to the guests and help sponsor him for Tom. Well, there was 2 times I went out there, there were supposed to be guests, which is my main reason for coming out there. They weren't there. So it was actually a very fruitless from that standpoint. But I used to tell myself, I'm doing things that nobody else is willing to do, so I'm going to be able to have what nobody else has.
Yep.
And that was one of those moments in my life where I'm like, yep. So
it's like it's a stinging feeling, but once you realize that, you almost get excited. You're like, ooh, I can go through this again. Like I can have this expectation. If this is the worst case scenario, you just adapt and make the most of it. And like there 9 times out of 10 people are going to be like, oh, this stinks. Like people don't respect me, and they become entitled a little bit, And there are times where people flat out it's kind of disrespectful to do that last minute, but it's like you got to roll with the punches. You really want to do this?
Yeah.
Like 90% of it is grunt work and you doing stuff you don't want to do.
Right.
Like that's life.
Well, and it's like, okay, what's the seed of equal or greater benefit that's going to come out of this, right? What can I do now that I'm in Vegas and I'm not obligated to that 2 hours I'm going to be doing from production to talking to them and all that stuff? Well, how do I go meet some people? How do I get maybe some other people for the show and like finding ways to be creative about that? Because there's always something good that can come out of it if you really work on it. And that was one of my main messages yesterday. It's like, dude, life happens sometimes, but looking for that seed of equal or greater benefit.
Yeah, happy accidents, as Bob Ross always used to say.
Yep. Oh yeah, the painter.
Yep.
I loved him. Well, cool, man. It sounds like you got things are growing like crazy. You got some really cool guests on deck. You got a very clear picture of the future, and I know you're going to end up an MLB announcer someday, play-by-play. You got all the tools, and you're building the network now.
Yeah.
So
which is like the most important thing too. It's like people are like, well, I have the degree, I have the college experience, I'm going through the rigors of like minor league ball or, freelance work if you want to work for like a national station like a Fox or an ESPN. But it's all about who you know at the end of the day. And obviously the foundation is your talent, but...
And you got to be able to deliver a product, right? Whether your product is your talent or whatever. But like an example yesterday, I'd never met this guy I mentioned, spoke with him yesterday, Zach. And so he grew up, and his dad and Paul Westphal were best friends. They traveled together. I'm like, wait, I'm 1 degree of separation from somebody who knows Paul Westphal, used to travel with them in vacation. And I never knew that guy before. Now, he's coming on the podcast. I look forward to he's got an amazing story. But it's like that one person at a time now connects you to their network as long as you have a relationship. And then, you just show value to. Like, I'm not looking to get anything out of that other than just, make a new friend.
Oh, exactly. And that's like the one thing I take pride into with all these people that I meet. I try to have the most genuine conversation I can on the show.
Yep.
Like, I had a kid who made millions. He's 25 years old, a year older than me, has made millions in the NFT space. And we actually grew up 20 minutes from each other in New Jersey, and I found that out 40 minutes into the podcast. And he told me right before we started, he's like, yeah, I usually go like 25, 30 minutes tops because I tend to talk fast, knock out questions. And in my head, I'm like, all right, challenge accepted. I'm going to keep asking you questions because I'm not going to ask you about NFT. I might ask you 1 or 2 things about NFT.
Yeah.
For the most part, we're just talking about life, college experience. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? How to build revenue doing what he did, certain projects, all these different things that we get into, talking so passionately about. And then I look at the clock because there's a clock on the board. It's like an hour 20 in. I'm like, I win. We almost went 90 minutes. He's like, dude, I've never gone this long before. And he's like, whoever you want, like from my, connection board, he's like, just let me know if you want them on the show. He's like, you're a great interviewer. Just, provide that value. You want to be like the most valuable player when it comes to, providing value for your network, because then everybody's going to want to hear from you and reach out to you and connect you to all these different people.
Well, it's so... one of the things I've always, I don't know always, but, at one point I learned that when you connect people together, you're always the person that they either talk about or think about when they get together. And the more and more people you can connect together too, in addition to have those relationships, and you have this gigantic web that are connected to you somehow, it's pretty cool. Like I saw it yesterday. Like I was only a speaker there because one of my best friends, Johnny, since I knew back in the Amway days, it's one of the realtors who refers him business, Chris, who put on the event. And Chris knows not only Johnny, but my buddy Corey super well. And I walk in the room and there's like 10 different people coming up to me that I've known mostly through my relationship with Johnny. It was mostly connections that he made for me. So it's like cool to see that spider web come together of life. So, well, man, you're crushing it. Anything you want to ask of the audience?
Anything I want to ask to the audience?
Or ask from the audience?
From the audience. Oh, just like, comment, and subscribe on our page, guys. It's at Jack O'Hara TV on YouTube. You can follow me at Jack O'Hara TV on Instagram as well as TikTok. And again, come to the Hot Chick in Scottsdale, Arizona. Look it up in Google Maps. I have no idea where it is. Look up the Hot Chick in Old Town Scottsdale. Come to a live show. Come on the podcast. Come tell stories. I love meeting people. Like, it's an open invite. You know, like they have the open challenges in WWE. I have an open invite to come on the podcast whenever you're in town. We got shows all summer long.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on today. It was great to see you.
Absolutely. Anytime, Josh.
All right, guys. I know you got some fun stories out of this. We're going to cut up some clips, but share the show out. I think people will be entertained because we didn't just talk about business, the comedy side. We talked about life. I appreciate you guys. Please, make sure you subscribe if you have not. Leave us a comment. We appreciate it, and we will see you next time.